Okay, if you're a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That little knot in your stomach every single time your kid grabs a tablet or a phone. It feels like the challenge of our generation, right? But what if I told you this panic is, well, ancient? Let's get into it.
I just love this quote. It's so brilliant because it kind of pokes fun at our modern anxieties, right? It's like, hey, just make sure your kid also learns how to hunt mammoths. It's a perfect reminder that every generation of parents has had their version of a new, scary technology. For our ancestors, it was, fire. For us, it's that glowing rectangle that our kids can't seem to put down.
So yeah, let's start right there. This whole idea of parenting panic, we'll call it fire versus phones.
It's pretty wild when you think about it. The technology is completely different, obviously, but that core worry, it's exactly the same. That deep down fear that we're somehow messing up our kids because of this new thing we don't fully understand, well, that's been around for as long as there have been parents.
And you know what makes it 1,000 times worse? The so-called experts can't seem to agree on anything. It feels like every other week there's a new headline. One day it's, screens are literally ruining your child's brain. And the next it's, the evidence is pretty weak. I mean, how is any parent supposed to navigate that? It's just this confusing mess that leaves you feeling totally lost.
Okay, so let's take a step back. Forget counting screen minutes for a second. What if we focused on something much, much bigger? Something that decades of research says is the real foundation of great parenting.
And that really brings us to the most important question, doesn't it? In this sea of conflicting advice, what actually matters? Where should we be putting our energy as parents? And here's the spoiler. It turns out the answer has almost nothing to do with technology.
Well, a really helpful way to think about this is what some people call the three-legged stool of evidence-based parenting. See, the best research evidence, that's just one leg of the stool. The other two legs are just as important: your expertise and values as a parent and your child's own unique needs and circumstances. The science is a great starting point, sure, but at the end of the day, you are the world's leading expert on your family.
And when you look at that first leg, the research leg, and you clear away all the noise about screens, there's one massive, powerful idea that just shines through. It's like a North Star that can guide you through pretty much any parenting challenge. And here it is. It's called authoritative parenting. Now, don't get that confused with authoritarian. That's totally different. This is all about balance. It's the combination of high warmth, love, support, connection, and high structure, rules, boundaries, expectations. This one idea, this balance, is the single biggest predictor of a child's long-term well-being. It's way more important than any specific rule you could make about an iPad. Seriously, think of it as the operating system for your entire family.
Okay, that all sounds great in theory, right? But what about in the real world? What happens when you tell your 5-year-old that Bluey is over and they have a complete floor-pounding meltdown? How does warmth and structure help then? Well, let's get practical and open up our digital discipline toolkit.
So to put this whole warmth and structure thing into action, we can actually borrow some tools from basic behavioral science. Because honestly, understanding a little bit about why our kids do what they do, it's like a superpower when you're trying to deal with those tech-fueled tantrums.
A lot of this goes back to a famous psychologist, B.F. Skinner, and his theory of operant conditioning. And look, don't let the fancy name scare you off. The idea is actually super simple. Behaviors that get rewarded are more likely to happen again, and behaviors that have a bad consequence, well, they're less likely to happen again. I mean, we're all kind of like rats in a box pressing levers for little rewards, right? I'm mostly kidding. Let's break this down. Take that classic post-screen time meltdown. Your kid starts screaming because their show is over. And to make the screaming stop, you cave and give the iPad back. We've all been there. Well, in behavioral terms, that's called positive reinforcement. You've added something good, the iPad, right after the tantrum. So what have you accidentally taught your child's brain? You've taught them that screaming is the magic button to get what they want. So what's the better way? You use your toolkit. You combine warmth and structure. The warmth sounds like, hey, I know it's really hard to stop playing. It's so much fun. You're validating their feelings. The structure sounds like, but like we agreed, screen time is over now. You give warnings, you make the plan together beforehand, but the absolute key is to hold that boundary. You have to be firm, you have to be kind, and you have to be consistent. Okay, let's tackle the big one. The one that, let's be honest, is probably the real reason you're even watching this. The fear that's hiding underneath all the other little worries. The connection between screens and our kids' mental health. This right here, this is the chart that keeps parents up at night. You can see it clear as day. Right around 2012, as smartphones basically became universal for teens, you see this scary, sharp climb in reported anxiety and depression, especially for girls. The two lines go up together, the correlation is impossible to ignore, and it's really at the heart of this entire debate. But, and this is a huge but, as any scientist will tell you a million times, correlation is not the same thing as causation.
And this quote really says it perfectly. Yeah, there's a very good chance that social media has played a role in the teen mental health crisis. But at the same time, these things are always incredibly complex. It's just too easy, too simple to point a finger at TikTok or Instagram and say, that's the villain. The reality is always, always messier than that. I mean, just look at the debate over violent video games. It's a perfect example of this. For decades, you've had one camp of scientists saying, this stuff is a risk factor for aggression, and another camp saying, hold on, the effects are tiny and the research methods are all wrong. The main takeaway here isn't who is right. It's that even the experts who've spent their lives studying this stuff are still arguing about it. The science is still a work in progress.
So, where does that leave us parents? It can feel a little overwhelming, I know. But what if we made a conscious choice to shift our focus? What if we stopped focusing so much on fear and started focusing on how we can help our kids not just survive, but actually thrive in the world as it exists today, which, like it or not, is a very connected, very digital world?
So let's boil it all down. What are the big takeaways here? First, focus on connection, not just correction. Your relationship is way more powerful than any parental control app. Second, prioritize that warmth and structure foundation over obsessing about screen time rules. Third, model the kind of digital life you want your kids to have. And finally, never forget that three-legged stool. You are the expert on your own family.
And I really want this last quote to sink in. Our kids are like emotional sponges, you know? They absorb our anxiety. So if we're parenting from a place of constant fear about technology, we're basically just handing that fear straight to them. But if we can parent from a place of confidence in our core principles of warmth and structure, we give them that same confidence to take with them.
So maybe the single best thing we can do is to just reframe the entire question we're asking ourselves. Instead of asking, how do I control my child's screen time? What if we asked, how can I use warmth and structure to guide them through this digital world? See that shift? It's not about control, it's about connection and guidance. And moving from a question based in fear to one based in empowerment, well, that changes everything. It puts the focus right back where it's always belonged. Not on the shiny screens, but on the kind of thoughtful, loving, and structured parenting that we know deep down is what truly matters.